Before we begin our story, if you enjoy narratives about resilience and the human spirit, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. The world had ended. Or at least, that is what it felt like to Lila Hart. There was no sound at first, just a ringing in her ears, a high-pitched frequency that drowned out the wind. Then, the sensation of cold, a biting, aggressive cold that seemed to possess teeth, began to gnaw at her exposed skin. Lila blinked, her eyelashes heavy with frost. The world was upside down. The smell of gasoline and pine sap was overwhelming, a nauseating cocktail that signaled catastrophe. She tried to move, instinct screaming at her to flee the metallic cage of her sedan, which was now crumpled against a massive spruce tree at the bottom of a ravine. "Okay, Lila, move. Just move," she whispered, her voice sounding foreign, raspy and weak. She placed her hands on the ceiling, which was now the floor, and pushed. Her upper body responded. Her arms were bruised, shaking, but functional. She dragged herself a few inches, gasping as the seatbelt dug into her chest. With trembling fingers, she found the release mechanism. Click. She dropped a few inches, hitting the debris of the dashboard. Then came the pain. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a white-hot lightning bolt that shot up from her shins, tore through her thighs, and exploded in her brain. She screamed, a sound that was swallowed instantly by the vast, indifferent forest. "My legs," she choked out. She looked down, but the dashboard had crushed inward. She couldn't see them, but she could feel the unnatural angle, the grinding of bone against bone even with the slightest shift of her weight. She wasn't going anywhere. Panic, cold and sharp, set in. She reached for her phone, which had been mounted on the dash. The screen was shattered, a spiderweb of glass over black nothingness. Dead. No signal. No battery. No hope. Lila slumped back, her breath forming distinct, frantic clouds in the freezing air. She was 24 years old. She was a pianist. Her hands were her life, but right now her legs were her death sentence. She was 5 miles from the main highway, on a service road, the shortcut, her GPS had called it, in the middle of a blizzard that the weatherman had promised would miss the county. Minutes turned into an hour. The temperature was dropping rapidly. In survival psychology, this is known as the resignation phase, where the shock wears off and the lethal reality sets in. Hypothermia would take her before the internal bleeding did, she thought. She closed her eyes, listening to the wind howl through the broken windshield. Then a sound cut through the wind, the crunch of tires on gravel and ice. Slow, heavy. Lila's eyes snapped open. Up on the embankment 50 feet above her, twin beams of light sliced through the falling snow. A vehicle. It had stopped. "Help!" she screamed, though her voice was failing. "I'm down here, please!" A car door slammed. Heavy boots crunched on the snow. A flashlight beam swept over the ravine, dancing over the trees until it locked onto the smoking ruin of her car. "Hello?" A voice called out. Deep. Baritone. Controlled. It wasn't a frantic shout. It was a command. "I'm here," Lila sobbed. "Please help me." The figure began to descend. He didn't scramble or slide. He moved with calculated precision, navigating the steep, icy slope as if he were part of the terrain. As he got closer, the flashlight illuminated him. He was tall, wearing a heavy canvas jacket that looked like it had seen better decades, and a dark beanie pulled low. His face was a map of hard lines and rough stubble, his eyes dark and unreadable. This was Ethan Cross. He reached the car, crouching low to look through the shattered window. He didn't offer empty platitudes like, "It's going to be okay." Instead, his eyes scanned the interior, assessing the structural integrity of the wreck, the smell of fuel, and finally, her. "Engines off?" he asked. I think so. It stalled when I hit." "Good. Smell of gas is strong. We need to get you out. Fire risk is low due to the temp, but not zero." He reached in, his gloves thick and rough. "I'm going to pull the door. Cover your face." With a grunt of exertion that sounded like tearing metal, he wrenched the driver's side door open. It groaned in protest, the hinges snapping, but it gave way. Ethan leaned in. "Can you move?" Lila looked at him, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I can't walk, sir. My legs are broken." Ethan paused. He took off a glove, reaching down to gently touch her shins. Lila cried out in agony. He pulled his hand back, his face grim. He didn't need an X-ray to know. Tibia and fibula fractures, likely bilateral. Compound, maybe not yet, but moving her would be torture. He looked at the steep embankment, then back at her. The snow was falling harder now, blotting out the world. "The ambulance," Lila started. "Call them." "No signal," Ethan said flatly. "And even if there were, they wouldn't get a rig down this service road in this drift. By the time they chopped a heli in, you'd be froze solid." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also a spark of fight. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, tasting like memories of mountains in Afghanistan he tried to forget. He turned his back to her and knelt down in the snow, offering his broad shoulders. "Put your arms around my neck," he ordered. "What? You can't." "It's too far up." Ethan turned his head slightly. His voice dropped an octave, resonating with a certainty that anchored her spinning world. "Then get on my back." Lila hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his neck. He grabbed her thighs. She screamed into his jacket as the movement jarred the brakes, and with a surge of power that seemed impossible for one man, he stood up, lifting her from the wreckage of her life. The ascent was brutal. Ethan Cross was 42 years old. His knees creaked, his lower back carried the phantom pain of a shrapnel injury from 2014, and his lungs burned. But he did not stop. He carried Lila not like a sack of potatoes, but locked in a high carry, keeping her legs as immobile as possible against his torso to act as a splint. Every step he took up the ravine was a calculation. Test the footing, shift weight, drive. Lila had passed out from the pain halfway up, her head lolling against his shoulder. That was a mercy. It allowed him to focus. When they reached the road, the wind was a gale. His truck, an old monochromatic pickup that looked like a beast of burden, was idling. But as he approached it, he hesitated. He looked at the road ahead. A massive pine had fallen across the path about a quarter-mile down. He had seen it on his way in. That's why he had stopped. He was blocked in. And behind him, the storm had already buried the tracks he made coming here. "Damn it," he whispered. He gently lowered Lila onto the tailgate, laying her on a heavy wool blanket he kept in the bed. She groaned, consciousness flickering back. "Where are we?" she mumbled. "Top of the ridge," Ethan said, pulling a first aid kit from his cab. "Listen to me. The road is blocked. My truck can't get out. We have to move." "Move where?" "There's a ranger station. Old Forestry Lookout. It's about 4 miles north, through the timberline. It'll have a radio and a wood stove." 4 miles? Lila stared at the dark forest. You can't carry me 4 miles. Ethan was already working. He pulled a knife, a heavy, fixed-blade tactical knife, and cut away the denim of her jeans. The bruising was horrific, turning purple and black instantly. The legs were swollen. Educational insight. Field medicine. Ethan knew the priority wasn't fixing the bone. It was stabilization and circulation. In a survival scenario involving fractures, the greatest threats are shock and fat embolisms, where marrow enters the bloodstream. He checked her capillary refill, pressing on her toenail. The color returned in 2 seconds. Circulation was intact. Good. Next, splinting. He used a collapsible shovel handle and a tire iron from his truck, binding them to her legs with duct tape and strips of the cut blanket. It wasn't pretty, but it immobilized the joints above and below the break. "I'm not leaving you here," Ethan said, tightening the last strip. "And we can't stay in the truck. The gas will run out, the heater will die, and this metal box will turn into a freezer." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "I was a Navy SEAL for 12 years, ma'am. I've carried packs heavier than you for 3 days straight without sleep. 4 miles is a warm-up." It was a lie, a necessary one. His back was already screaming. He hadn't done a ruck like this in 5 years, and certainly not in this weather. But panic kills faster than cold. He needed her calm. "My name is Lila," she whispered. "Ethan." He pulled a heavy poncho from his gear bag and wrapped it around her, then adjusted his own gear. He crouched down again. "Up, Lila. We walk." As she climbed onto his back again, the weight settled. It was heavy. Heavier than gear because it was shifting, living weight. They entered the tree line. The forest was a cathedral of shadows. The snow crunched rhythmically. To distract her from the pain, and perhaps to distract himself from the lactic acid building in his quads, Ethan began to assess the environment. Educational insight. Thermal regulation. In extreme cold, sweating is dangerous. If you sweat, your clothes get wet. When you stop moving, that moisture freezes, leading to rapid hypothermia. Ethan deliberately paced himself. He opened the vents on his jacket. He needed to be cold enough not to sweat, but warm enough not to shiver. It's a delicate balance known as staying comfortably cool. "Why were you out here, Ethan?" Lila asked, her voice close to his ear. "I like the quiet," he grunted, stepping over a fallen log. "People talk too much." "I'm talking too much?" "You're injured. You get a pass." Ethan's mind drifted. He remembered the Hindu Kush. He remembered carrying Miller, his radio operator, 3 clicks to the extraction point. Miller hadn't made it. The weight on his back then had been a corpse. The weight now was a life. "Don't let her become Miller," he told himself. "Not tonight. Tell me about the piano," Ethan said, trying to keep her conscious. "You have pianist hands." "I play jazz," she murmured, the rhythm of his walking lulling her into a trance-like state. Improvisation, making sense out of chaos. "That's what we're doing right now," Ethan said, improvising. They had covered a mile, 3 to go. The wind picked up, howling through the canopy like a banshee. Ethan checked his compass. He was navigating by dead reckoning, using a known starting point and estimating distance and direction. In this whiteout, visuals were useless. Suddenly Ethan stopped. He felt the vibration before he heard the sound. He knelt slowly, easing the strain on his knees, and signaled for Lila to be quiet, though she couldn't see his gesture. "What is it?" she whispered, sensing the tension in his muscles. "Hush." Far behind them, back at the service road, the darkness was pierced by high-intensity floodlights. Not the yellow halogen of a standard car, but the blinding white LEDs of a modified off-road vehicle. They swept the trees. They swept the ravine. "Is that help?" Lila asked, hope rising in her voice. Ethan watched the lights. They weren't moving like a rescue vehicle. They were erratic, aggressive. And then he saw the beam hit his truck. He saw a silhouette get out. The figure didn't check for survivors. The figure smashed the remaining windows of his truck with a crowbar. Ethan's blood ran cold. That wasn't a rescue. That was a cleanup crew. Ethan moved instantly. He stood up, ignoring the burning in his legs, and moved deeper into the shadows of the spruce trees. "Ethan, why aren't we signaling them?" Lila hissed, confused and terrified. "They aren't here to help, Lila," Ethan said, his voice low and hard as granite. "Did you see who hit you?" "No. It was just lights, high beams. They came into my lane. I swerved." "They didn't just come into your lane. They pushed you." Ethan was moving faster now, altering his route. He wasn't heading straight for the ranger station anymore. He was engaging in counter-tracking. Educational insight, evasion tactics. When being tracked, the straightest line is the most predictable. Ethan began to dogleg. He would walk in one direction, then sharply turn 90 degrees to walk parallel, then turn again. This makes it difficult for a tracker to anticipate the next move. He also stuck to the hard lines, walking on exposed rock or ice patches where footprints wouldn't leave a deep impression in the snow. "Why?" Lila's voice trembled. "Why would someone want to hurt me? I'm nobody. I'm just a musician. Think. Did you see something? Carry something?" Lila was silent for a moment, the pain in her legs throbbing in time with her heart. "My brother. He works for a contracting firm in the city. He gave me a flash drive. Said to keep it safe until Christmas. Said his apartment wasn't secure." "Where is it?" "In my purse. In the car." Ethan cursed silently. "It's gone. They have it. But they don't know if you saw what was on it, or if you made copies. That makes you a loose end." The realization hit Lila harder than the cold. She wasn't just a victim of an accident. She was a target. The forest, previously just a hazard, was now a killing field. Behind them, the roar of an engine grew louder. The vehicle on the road was moving slowly, scanning the perimeter. Then the engine cut. Silence. Why did they stop? Lila whispered. They're getting out on foot, Ethan said. They saw our tracks leaving the truck. Ethan stopped by a large boulder. He needed to reevaluate. He was unarmed, save for his knife. He was carrying 130 pounds of injured civilian. He was outnumbered, but he had one advantage. This is my backyard, he whispered to himself. He adjusted Lila on his back. Lila, listened to me very carefully. From this point on, sound is our enemy. If you need to speak, you whisper directly into my ear. If I stop, you hold your breath. Do you understand? Yes. She buried her face in the crook of his neck. She could smell the scent of old tobacco and pine on his jacket. It was the smell of safety. Ethan looked at the snow. The storm was intensifying. Good. The fresh powder would fill their tracks within minutes. He needed to buy time. He moved toward a dense thicket of rhododendrons. The branches whipped at his face, but he didn't flinch. He was entering the zone, a mental state trained into him during BUDS, basic underwater demolition, SEAL training. Pain is information. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. As they moved, Ethan scanned the terrain for resources. He wasn't just fleeing. He was hunting for an advantage. Ethan, Lila whispered, the cold, I can't feel my toes anymore. Ethan stopped. This was critical. If she lost sensation, frostbite was minutes away. He couldn't build a fire. The light would give them away. He had to use body heat. He found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive overturned oak tree. It was a natural windbreak. We're taking a break, he said. They'll catch us. No, they won't. They're moving fast, looking for easy signs. We're going to vanish for 10 minutes. I need to warm your feet. He set her down in the hollow, shielding her with his body. He unzipped his jacket and pulled her freezing feet, still wrapped in the makeshift splints, against his abdomen, inside his layers. Educational insight. The core to extremity transfer. The most effective way to rewarm an extremity in the field is direct skin-to-skin contact with a core heat source, abdomen, armpits, or groin, of a healthy individual. It's a standard wilderness medicine protocol. Ethan sacrificed his own core heat to save her toes. It burns, she hissed as the blood returned. That means the nerves are alive, Ethan said, looking out into the darkness. Through the trees, about 400 yards back, a beam of light sliced through the woods. Then another. 2 men. Armed. 2 bogies, Ethan murmured. Tracking poles, rifles. He looked at Lila. She was terrified, shivering violently. They have guns, she whispered. So do I, Ethan said, tapping his temple. The most dangerous weapon is the one between your ears. And right now we're going to take them to school. He gently withdrew her feet and zipped his jacket. Ready? No. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He hoisted her up. The pain in his back was a dull roar now, a constant companion. He turned away from the pursuers and headed toward the steepest, rockiest part of the ridge. Where are we going? Lila asked. That looks like a cliff. It is, Ethan replied. They won't expect us to go up. They'll expect us to go down. Toward the valley, toward the easy path. We're going to the Wolf's Tooth. The what? A rock formation. High ground. We get there. We hold the cards. As they began the grueling climb, the snow swirled around them like a curtain closing on the stage. The chase was on, but the pursuers made a mistake. They thought they were hunting a wounded girl. They didn't know they were tracking a man who had made a career out of being the thing that goes bump in the night. The incline was no longer a slope. It was a wall of ice and scree. The Wolf's Tooth was a jagged granite outcrop that jutted from the side of the mountain like a broken bone, exposed to the full fury of the wind. Ethan's breathing was ragged. Every inhale felt like swallowing shards of glass. The 130 pounds on his back had transformed into a crushing lead weight. His quadriceps were firing in spasms, the lactic acid burning so intensely it felt like his muscles were dissolving. Ethan, Lila whispered, her teeth chattering near his ear. Put me down. You're going to have a heart attack. Negative, he grunted, slamming the toe of his boot into a crust of ice to create a foothold. We stop. We freeze. We keep moving. We live. He adjusted his grip on her thighs. His hands, even inside the gloves, were stiff claws. He wasn't relying on strength anymore. He was relying on mechanics. Educational insight. The rest step. Mountaineers and Sherpas use a technique called the rest step to climb high altitudes without burning out. Ethan stepped forward, locked his rear knee, and momentarily rested his entire body weight on the skeleton of that straight leg. This allowed his muscles to relax for a fraction of a second with every single step. Step, lock, breathe. Step, lock, breathe. It is the only way to carry a heavy load uphill for hours. Below them, the two flashlight beams were bobbing erratically. The hunters were struggling. They were city men, hired muscle used to pavement and intimidation, not waist-deep powder and 30-degree inclines. They had fallen behind, but they were persistent. "They're still coming," Lila said, looking back over his shoulder. "Let them come." Ethan wheezed. "The mountain. We'll judge them." They reached the base of the rock formation. Here, the snow had been scoured away by the wind, leaving slick, black rock. Ethan dropped to one knee, gasping for air. His vision blurred at the edges, a sign of glucose depletion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a packet of energy gel, old and possibly expired, from his survival stash. He tore it open with his teeth. "Eat half," he ordered, squeezing the goo into Lila's mouth. "It tastes like chalk," she grimaced, swallowing it. "It's fuel, sugar and caffeine. It hits the blood in 5 minutes." He swallowed the rest. Ethan scanned the rock face. There was a narrow fissure, a chimney-like crack that led up to a small plateau protected by an overhang. It was a defensible position. "Hold on tight," he said. "This gets technical." He began to scramble up the rock. This wasn't hiking. It was bouldering with a human backpack. He jammed his fingers into cracks, finding leverage where there was none. At one point, his boot slipped on a patch of black ice. They dropped 2 feet. Lila screamed. Ethan slammed his chest against the rock, his fingers tearing at the stone, finding a grip just in time. Ideally, the fall would have killed them both. Realistically, it just tore the skin off his knuckles and sent a shockwave of agony through his lower back. "Got you," he growled through gritted teeth. "I got you." He pulled them up the final ledge and rolled onto the flat stone of the overhang. They were sheltered from the direct wind now, tucked into a shallow cave about 10 feet deep. Ethan collapsed onto his back, chest heaving. Lila lay beside him, her splinted legs stretched out awkwardly. For a long minute, the only sound was the wind howling outside their stone sanctuary and the desperate rhythm of their breathing. "You're crazy," Lila whispered, staring at the rock ceiling. "You're actually crazy." "Occupational hazard." Ethan choked out a laugh that turned into a cough. He sat up slowly. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was rushing in to take its place. But he couldn't rest. Not yet. "Stay here. Keep the poncho wrapped tight. I need to rig the perimeter." "Rig? You don't have any weapons." "The environment is the weapon." Ethan moved to the edge of the ledge. The hunters were at the base of the Wolf's Tooth now, about 200 feet below. He could hear their voices carried by the wind. They were arguing. "I'm not going up there, man. It's suicide." "Boss said no witnesses. We go up, verify, come down. Look, there's blood on the rock. He's hurt." Ethan looked at his hand. He was indeed bleeding. He wiped it on his pants. He looked around the ledge. He needed a force multiplier. He found a cluster of loose rocks, fist-sized to melon-sized, piled in the corner of the overhang. Debris from years of freeze-thaw cycles. Educational insight. The psychology of noise. In a high-stress, low-visibility environment, human hearing becomes hypersensitive but unreliable. The brain tries to identify threats, often interpreting random sounds as danger. Ethan knew that if he could control the sound, he could control their fear. He didn't need to hit them. He just needed to make them believe the mountain was attacking them. He carefully stacked 3 large rocks on the very edge of the precipice, balancing them precariously. He tied a length of paracord from his survival bracelet to the bottom rock, running the line back into the cave. Next, he took his empty energy gel packet and a few loose twigs. He wedged the plastic wrapper into a crack in the rock face where the wind hit the hardest. The wind caught the plastic, causing it to flap rapidly against the stone. Thwack, thwack, thwack. It sounded exactly like the slide of a rifle bolt or footsteps on gravel. He retreated into the shadows of the cave, sitting next to Lila. "What did you do?" she asked. "Psychological warfare," he whispered. "They're cold, they're tired, and they're scared. I just gave them a reason to hesitate." Below, the flapping sound echoed. "Did you hear that?" one of the hunters yelled. "He's up there. He's racking a slide." "He doesn't have a gun, idiot." "You don't know that. He's a SEAL, right? Those guys always have something." Ethan pulled on the paracord. The pile of rocks tumbled off the edge. They clattered down the cliff face, gathering speed, smashing into other rocks, creating a mini avalanche of noise that sounded massive in the dark canyon. "Rock slide, move!" The hunters scrambled for cover, shouting in panic. A shot was fired blindly into the air, a muzzle flash illuminating the swirling snow. Ethan smiled grimly. "They're wasting ammo and energy. They won't climb up tonight. They'll wait for daybreak." "So we're safe?" Lila asked. "Safe is a relative term," Ethan said, his face serious. He turned to check her legs. "We're stuck. We have maybe 6 hours until dawn. If we don't freeze to death by then, we have to fight them in the morning." He checked her toes again. They were cold, pale. "We have a problem, Lila. The temperature is dropping. It's going to hit -20 tonight with wind chill. This poncho isn't enough." He looked at the back of the cave. It was too small for a fire, and the smoke would choke them. He had to create a microclimate. "We need to build a nest," he said. He gathered every loose pine branch and pile of dry moss he could find near the entrance, piling it against the back wall to insulate them from the cold stone. "You're shivering," Lila noted. Her own teeth were chattering uncontrollably. This was the second stage of hypothermia, violent shivering as the body desperately tries to generate heat. If the shivering stopped while she was still cold, she would be dying. Ethan sat down on the bed of pine boughs. He opened his heavy canvas jacket. "Come here," he commanded gently. Lila hesitated only a second. Survival instinct overrode modesty. She scooted back against his chest. He wrapped his jacket around both of them, then the wool blanket, then the poncho over everything. They were a cocoon of layers. "This is strictly survival," Ethan muttered, though his voice lacked its usual edge. "I know," Lila whispered, leaning her head back against his shoulder. She could feel his heart beating. It was slow, steady. A sledgehammer against a ribcage. "Ethan?" "Yeah. Why did you say you were trying to be human again earlier?" Ethan was silent. The wind whistled outside. "I spent 12 years being a tool," he said finally. "A hammer. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You stop seeing people. You just see targets, assets, civilians, collateral. I got out because I forgot how to look at a person and just see a person." He tightened his arms around her as a gust of wind buffeted the cave. "The mission you mentioned," Lila probed gently. "The one that went wrong." "Kandahar, 2018, Ethan said, the words coming out like old rust. "We were extracting a family, informants. The father was injured. I was carrying him just like I carried you. But I wasn't fast enough. We took fire. I took a hit in the back, went down. When I woke up, he was gone. I survived. He didn't." Lila reached up and placed her cold hand over his clasped hands on her chest. "You didn't drop me," she whispered. "Not yet. You won't. I know you won't." Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of guilt felt a tiny bit lighter. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the cold. Or maybe it was the fact that this time, the burden on his back was fighting with him. Time distorted. The night became a series of drifting moments between consciousness and the black void of sleep. Educational insight, sleep deprivation and survival. In extreme cold, falling into a deep sleep can be fatal. The metabolism slows down, body temperature drops, and you may never wake up. This is the warm death. Ethan knew he had to keep them in a state of semi-lucidity. He set a mental clock. Every 20 minutes he would shift, ask a question, or pinch Lila's arm. "Lila, wake up." I'm playing," she mumbled. "Concerto in G minor." "Play it later. Tell me the capital of Montana." "Helena," she slurred. It's Helena. Let me sleep. No. Tell me your favorite food. Lasagna. With extra cheese? My mom's recipe. Keep thinking about that lasagna. Think about the steam coming off it. The heat. Ethan was fighting his own battle. His legs were cramping violently. The old shrapnel wound in his back was throbbing, a dull ache that synchronized with his pulse. He hallucinated briefly, seeing the shadows of the cave turn into figures from his past. He blinked them away. Stay present. Stay here. Around 3:00 a.m. the wind died down. The silence that followed was heavy, amplified by the snow. Ethan shifted carefully. Lila groaned. My legs. They feel like they're on fire. That's good, Ethan said softly. Pain is good. Numbness is bad. He peered out of the cave. The moon had broken through the clouds, illuminating the valley in a spectral blue light. Below, he saw the glow of a small fire. The hunters had set up camp at the base of the climb. They were waiting. Ethan studied their position. They had positioned themselves at the choke point. There was no way down without going through them. 2 men. Ethan whispered to himself. 1 rifle, 1 handgun likely. They have comms. He looked at Lila. She was pale, her lips tinged with blue. She wouldn't survive another day out here. She needed a hospital. He needed to end this. Lila, he whispered. She stirred. Yeah? At first light, they're coming up. They think we're frozen or helpless. Are we? Ethan looked at his hands. He flexed his stiff fingers. He looked at the knife on his belt. Then he looked at the loose rocks, the ice, the terrain. No, he said. We have the high ground. In military strategy, holding the high ground is worth 10 men. But you can't fight them while carrying me. I know, Ethan said. The realization hung in the air between them. I have to leave you here, in the cave. I have to go down and meet them. No! Lila gripped his arm, her eyes wide with panic. Don't leave me, please. If I stay here, they corner us. They throw a grenade or just wait us out. If I go down, I can ambush them while they're climbing. It's the only way. He turned her to face him. His eyes were tired, dark circles underneath them, but the gaze was intense and warm. I need you to be brave, Lila. Braver than you've ever been. I'm going to go down there and clear the path. Then I'm coming back for you. I promise. You promised that man in Kandahar too, she said, her voice breaking. Ethan flinched. The words hit their mark, but instead of anger, he nodded slowly. You're right, I did. He leaned in closer. That's why I'm not going to die today, because I owe the universe a life, and it's yours. He began to unwrap the cocoon. The cold air rushed in, brutal and shocking. Ethan checked his gear. He tightened his bootlaces. He checked his knife. He picked up a jagged rock the size of a grapefruit. Wait, Lila said. She reached into her pocket, struggling with the zipper, and pulled out something small. It was a silver locket. Take this, she said. My grandmother gave it to me. It has a picture of St. Christopher. Travel safe. Ethan hesitated, then took the cold metal chain. He wrapped it around his wrist. I'll bring it back, he said. He crawled to the edge of the cave. The sky was beginning to turn a bruised purple in the east. Dawn was coming. The hunters were stirring below, kicking snow over their fire. Ethan took a deep breath of the freezing air. He didn't feel the cold anymore. He felt the familiar deadly calm of the predator. He swung his legs over the edge of the cliff and began to descend into the shadows, moving silently toward the men who wanted them dead. The dawn didn't break. It bled into the sky. A dull, bruised gray light filtered through the heavy cloud cover, revealing the stark monochrome of the mountain. Ethan Cross moved with the agonizing slowness of a glacier. He was halfway down the rock face, clinging to the shadows of a vertical fissure. His body temperature had dropped during the night, and his muscles were stiff, reacting a fraction of a second slower than he wanted. Below him, the 2 men were gearing up. They were dressed in expensive tactical gear, too clean, too new. You take the left flank, the taller one said, checking the magazine of his rifle. I'll take the chimney. If he's up there, we flush him out. And the girl? Collateral. We find the drive, we leave. Let the cold finish them. Ethan's jaw tightened. He watched them split up. This was their mistake. In the military, unit cohesion is survival. Separating in hostile terrain with an unknown enemy is a death wish. Ethan targeted the man on the left, the one with the rifle. He was moving along a narrow goat path that skirted the base of the cliff. Ethan didn't climb down to the ground. He positioned himself on a ledge about 10 feet above the path. He waited. The cold seeped into his bones, making his shivering harder to suppress. He had to time this perfectly. Educational insight. The OODA loop combat strategy relies on the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. The person who cycles through this loop faster wins. Ethan had already observed the enemy and oriented himself to the terrain. The hunter was still observing, looking up at the peaks, unaware that the threat was directly above him. Ethan was 2 steps ahead in the mental cycle. The hunter stepped directly below the ledge. He paused to adjust his radio. Now. Ethan didn't jump, he dropped. He aimed his mass not at the man's head, but at his center of gravity. They collided with a sickening crunch of impact. The air left the hunter's lungs in a violent whoosh. Ethan drove the man into the snow, the momentum driving the wind out of him. The rifle clattered away, sliding over the edge of a steep drop-off. The man gasped, reaching for a sidearm. Ethan jammed his knee into the man's solar plexus and slammed the hilt of his heavy knife against the man's temple. It wasn't a kill shot, it was a switch-off. The man went limp, his eyes rolling back. Ethan exhaled, rolling off the unconscious body. 1 down. But the sound of the struggle had traveled. "Marco?" The voice of the second man echoed from around the bend. "You okay?" Ethan froze. He couldn't stay here. He grabbed the unconscious man's radio and turned the volume down, then dragged the body behind a snow-covered boulder. He checked the man's pockets. No keys to the vehicle. Damn. "Marco, sound off." The second man, the leader, appeared around the rock face about 30 yards away. He was holding a pistol, moving with much more discipline than the first. He saw the disturbed snow. He saw the drag marks. He didn't yell. He raised his weapon and fired. Crack! Crack! The bullets sparked off the granite inches from Ethan's head. Rock shards sprayed his face. Ethan scrambled back, diving behind the cover of a scree pile. "I know you're there, SEAL," the leader shouted. "You're tired. You're cold. Give me the girl and the drive, and you can walk away." "You and I both know that's a lie," Ethan yelled back, his voice hoarse. "Have it your way." The leader began to advance using cover, closing the distance. He was good. Ethan checked his surroundings. He was pinned. He had a knife. The enemy had a semi-automatic pistol in distance. Ethan looked at his hand. It was trembling. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump wearing off, leaving him with the shakes. Educational insight. Fine motor skills in combat. Under extreme stress, heart rate over 145 BPM, and extreme cold, the body loses fine motor skills, using fingers, manipulating triggers. It reverts to gross motor skills, pushing, pulling, grabbing. Ethan knew the shooter would struggle to aim precisely at a distance in this cold. His fingers would be numb. Ethan had to force a close-quarters engagement where aiming wasn't necessary, but leverage was. Ethan grabbed a handful of snow and packed it into a hard ball. He picked up a rock with his other hand. He threw the rock to his left, hitting a metal signpost that marked the trail. Clang. The leader swung his gun toward the noise, firing a reflex shot. In that split second of distraction, Ethan broke cover, charging not away, but toward the gunman. The distance was 20 yards. It takes a trained shooter about 1.5 seconds to recognize a threat, aim, and fire effectively. Ethan covered the ground in 3 seconds, sprinting through the knee-deep snow like a plow. The leader swung the gun back. He fired. Ethan felt a searing heat tear across his left bicep, a graze, deep and hot. He didn't stop. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into the gunman. They went down hard. The pistol flew from the leader's hand, skittering across the ice. Now it was a brawl. The leader was younger, stronger, and well-fed. Ethan was running on fumes. The leader twisted, landing a heavy elbow to Ethan's jaw. Lights flashed in Ethan's vision. He tasted blood. Ethan grunted, absorbing the blow, and used his weight to pin the man's hips. He went for a chokehold, but the leader was fast. He pulled a knife from his vest. a jagged, serrated combat blade. He slashed upward. Ethan jerked his head back, but the blade caught his collarbone, slicing through the canvas jacket and biting into the skin. "Die, old man," the leader grunted, pushing the knife toward Ethan's throat. Ethan caught the man's wrist. His grip was slipping. His gloves were wet. The knife tip hovered inches from his jugular. Ethan looked into the man's eyes. He saw rage. He saw arrogance. Ethan let go of the wrist with one hand and jammed his thumb deep into the man's eye socket. It was dirty. It was brutal. It was survival. The leader screamed, his head whipping back in reflex. The pressure on the knife eased. Ethan twisted the man's wrist, hearing the snap of cartilage. The knife dropped. Ethan grabbed it. He didn't hesitate. He drove the pommel, the handle end, of the knife down hard onto the man's forehead. The fight went out of the leader instantly. He slumped back, unconscious, breathing raggedly. Silence returned to the mountain. Ethan rolled off, lying in the snow. He gasped for air, each breath a jagged knife in his chest. He checked his arm. The bullet graze was bleeding freely, soaking his sleeve. The cut on his collarbone was stinging but superficial. He was alive. He forced himself to sit up. He stripped the outer tactical vest off the unconscious leader. He rifled through the pockets. Bingo. Car keys, and a wallet, and a satellite phone. Ethan stood up, swaying. The world spun. He needed to get to the truck. He needed to leave. But then he looked up. 400 feet above him, the wolf's tooth jutted into the sky. Lila was up there, waiting. "I promised," he whispered. The easy way out was to walk to the truck, drive to the nearest town, and come back with help. But that would take 3 hours. Lila had maybe 1 hour before the cold shut her organs down. He had to go back up. He grabbed the tactical vest. It was insulated, and the satellite phone. He left the guns. They were heavy, and the threat was neutralized. He needed to be light. He began the climb. It was the hardest physical thing he had ever done. Every pull up the rock face tore at his injured arm. He left a trail of red droplets on the gray stone. "One step," he grunted, "just one more." By the time he reached the ledge, his vision was tunneling. He crawled over the lip of the overhang. The nest of pine boughs was still there. Lila hadn't moved. "Lila," he croaked. She didn't answer. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He scrambled over to her. Her face was pale as marble. Her lips were gray. He pulled the glove off his good hand and touched her neck. Her skin was ice cold. "No," Ethan whispered. "No, no, no." He checked for a pulse. It was there, thready, faint, slow, very slow. "Come on, stick with me." He pulled the tactical vest he had stolen over her head, cinching it tight around her torso. It retained the body heat of the man who had worn it. "Lila, wake up." He shook her gently. Her eyelids fluttered. "Ethan." Her voice was barely a breath. Did you win?" "Yeah, kid, I won. But we're not done." He looked at her legs. The splints held, but the swelling was massive. "I got the keys," he said, showing her the fob. "And a sat phone. Rescue is coming, but we can't wait here. We have to go down." "I can't." "You don't have to. I'm carrying you." "You're bleeding," she noticed, seeing the dark stain on his arm. "It's just a scratch. Matches the one on my ego." He turned his back to her. "Load up. Last time, I promise." She draped her arms around his neck. As he lifted her, his knees buckled momentarily. He roared, a primal sound of exertion, and forced his legs to straighten. "Hold on," he ground out. "We're going home." The descent was a blur of pain and focus. Ethan didn't feel his feet anymore. He was operating on pure willpower. He navigated the treacherous path, stepping over the unconscious body of the first hunter, ignoring the blood running down his own arm. When they finally reached the service road, the snow had stopped. The sun was trying to break through. The hunter's vehicle, a massive modified SUV, was idling where they had left it. It was warm. It was salvation. Ethan opened the back door and gently laid Lila on the heated leather seats. He cranked the heat up to maximum. He climbed into the driver's seat, his hands shaking so badly he dropped the keys twice before getting them into the ignition. He picked up the satellite phone and dialed 911. "This is He paused, his voice cracking. "This is Ethan Cross. I have a critical trauma victim. Location, Service Road 4, Bitterroot Range. Send a chopper to the Mercy Hospital landing pad. I'm coming in hot." He put the truck in gear. As the warmth of the heater hit him, the adrenaline finally crashed. He looked in the rearview mirror. Lila was watching him, tears streaming down her face. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," Ethan said. He drove toward the horizon, leaving the mountain, the bodies, and his past behind him. But the hardest part wasn't the fight. It was what was about to happen when the adrenaline faded and the emotions caught up. The SUV tore down the mountain highway, a black streak against the blinding white of the morning snow. The heater was blasting, but Ethan felt a different kind of cold. The cold of dread. Beside him, Lila had stopped talking. "Lila," Ethan said, his voice rough. He reached over, keeping one hand on the wheel, and shook her shoulder. "Stay with me. Don't you dare quit on me now." She groaned, a weak, ragged sound. "So tired. I know. Sleep later. Right now, I need you to do a job. I need you to watch the road. Tell me if you see elk. Tell me if you see ice." It was busy work. A distraction. Educational insight. The phenomenon of afterdrop. Ethan knew that rewarming a hypothermia victim too fast, or moving them after rescue, triggers a dangerous physiological reaction called afterdrop. As the body warms up, blood vessels in the extremities, arms and legs, dilate. The cold, stagnant blood from these limbs rushes back to the core and the heart. This causes the core temperature to actually drop further, even though the person is in a warm environment. It can cause cardiac arrest. "My chest hurts," Lila whispered. "That's the blood moving," Ethan lied smoothly. "It means you're thawing out." He pressed the accelerator. The engine roared. He was doing 80 on a road rated for 50. His own arm was throbbing in time with the wipers. The bleeding had slowed, coagulating against his sleeve, but he was lightheaded. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cup holder, unscrewed it with his teeth, and splashed it on his face to stay alert. "Tell me about the music," Ethan demanded, his eyes scanning the horizon for the first signs of the city. "That piece you were playing in your head, the concerto. It's complex," Lila mumbled, her eyes closed. "The left hand fights the right hand. Tension and release. Like us," Ethan said. "We're the tension. The hospital is the release." "Ethan?" "Yeah." "You're a good man." Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He hadn't felt like a good man in a long time. He felt like a machine that broke things. But looking at this girl, broken but alive because of his back and his will, he felt a crack in his armor. "We're here," he said, spotting the city limits sign. He grabbed the satellite phone again. "Hospital, this is Cross. ETA 2 minutes. Patient is crashing. BP is dropping. Get the trauma team to the bay, now." He didn't wait for a confirmation. He ran the first red light of civilization, leaning on the horn, a harbinger of urgency cutting through the morning traffic. When he pulled into the emergency bay, it was like a pit stop. Nurses and doctors in scrubs swarmed the vehicle before he even put it in park. "Open the back," someone yelled. Ethan stumbled out of the driver's seat. His legs, having pushed him up a mountain and down a cliff, finally rebelled. He hit the pavement hard, catching himself on the doorframe. "Sir, are you injured?" A nurse was at his side instantly. "Not me," Ethan growled, shoving her away gently. "Her." He watched as they pulled Lila out. They were careful, professional. He saw them cutting away his tactical vest, checking her vitals. "Pulse is erratic. Get the crash cart." "Lila," Ethan yelled, taking a step forward. She turned her head on the gurney, her eyes finding his through the chaos of the medical team. She reached out a hand, weak, trembling. "Don't leave," she mouthed. Then the doors to the ER swung open, and they swallowed her whole. Ethan stood alone in the cold ambulance bay, the adrenaline draining out of him like water from a broken dam. He looked down at his boots. They were covered in mud and dried blood. He looked at his wrist. The St. Christopher medal was still there, silver shining against the grime. A security guard approached him hesitantly. "Sir, you can't park here." Ethan looked at the man, his eyes dark and hollow. "Move it for me." Then the world tilted sideways, and Ethan Cross finally allowed himself to fall. The beep, beep, beep was rhythmic. Annoying. Ethan opened his eyes. He was in a bed. Clean sheets. The smell of antiseptic. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his left arm reminded him he was mortal. He looked down. Stitches. A clean bandage. An IV line in his right hand. "Easy, sailor," a voice came from the doorway. A doctor, a woman with kind eyes and tired posture, walked in holding a clipboard. "You lost a pint of blood and were severely dehydrated. We patched the arm. You'll keep it." "The girl," Ethan croaked. His throat felt like he had swallowed sandpaper. "Lila Hart." The doctor's expression softened. "She's in surgery. Orthopedics is pinning her legs. It's a long procedure, but she's stable. The hypothermia was close. Very close. But she made it." Ethan let out a breath he felt he had been holding for 2 days. He lay back against the pillow. "Who were those men?" the doctor asked quietly. "Police are outside. They found the SUV. They found the men on the mountain. They want a statement." "They'll get it," Ethan said, closing his eyes. "Just give me a minute." He didn't care about the police. He didn't care about the medals or the news crews that would inevitably swarm. He cared about the promise. "I'll bring it back." He looked at the side table. His personal effects were in a plastic bag. The St. Christopher medal was there. 2 hours later, against medical advice, Ethan checked himself out. He put on his dirty canvas jacket. The nurses had tried to throw it away, but he salvaged it. He walked down the hallway, limping slightly. He found the ICU recovery room. Lila was there. She looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines. Her legs were elevated, encased in heavy white casts. Her face was clean, the bruises standing out starkly against her pale skin. She was asleep. Ethan pulled a plastic chair up to the bedside. The plastic creaked. He sat there for an hour, just watching the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was the best music he had ever heard. Better than jazz. Better than silence. Her eyes fluttered open. It took her a moment to focus. When she saw him, a faint smile touched her lips. "You look terrible," she whispered. "You don't look so great yourself." Ethan replied, his voice soft. Did you fix it?" "Police have the flash drive," Ethan said. "Your brother is safe. The men are in custody. It's over." Lila looked at the ceiling, tears pooling in her eyes. "I thought I was dead. In that ravine. I accepted it." "You didn't," Ethan said. "You fought. I just carried the baggage." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver locket. He unclasped it from his wrist and gently placed it in her hand. "Returned. As promised." Lila closed her fingers around the metal. Then she reached out and took Ethan's hand. Her skin was warm now, alive. Ethan froze. He wasn't used to touch, not gentle touch. For years his hands had been fists, or holding weapons, or gripping steering wheels. He looked at their hands, hers small and pianistic, his scarred and rough. "Thank you," she said. A tear slid down her cheek. "You saved my life." Ethan looked at her. He felt a pressure in his chest, a tightness in his throat that he hadn't felt since he was a child. He tried to swallow it down, to be the stoic warrior, but the dam was breaking. "No, Lila," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You don't understand." He squeezed her hand, bowing his head so his forehead rested on the bed rail, hiding his eyes. "I didn't save you," he choked out, the emotion finally washing over him, pure and cleansing. "You saved me." He had spent years trying to outrun the ghosts of the people he couldn't save. He had isolated himself on a mountain to wait for death. But in carrying her, in fighting for her breath, he had remembered how to breathe himself. He had remembered that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about connecting. Lila didn't say anything. She just squeezed his hand back, anchoring him to the world. In the quiet of the hospital room, the veteran Navy SEAL, the man of iron and ice, wept silently. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was the sound of the ice melting. It was the sound of a human being coming back to life. And outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the snow-capped mountains in a brilliant golden light.